I thought I might start with a multiple regression, if that's all right. Because I've been trying to understand what are the main causes of misery in this country in a quantitative sense. What are more important than what others? And I've been using the British cohort study and the household panel study and defining misery as the people who are in the bottom 10% according to how satisfied they are with their lives. And then I've been trying to see what explains whether somebody is or isn't in that category. So I've been taking obvious things: income, unemployment, you mentioned, physical illness, mental illness, and here are the partial correlation coefficients that go with those four. And I've got some others as well, but forget them. So here they are. I think this is really the message we need to get to the politicians. Income, 5%. Unemployment, 5%. Physical illness, 10%. Mental illness, 30%. I mean, it just is it sticks out like a sore thumb as the main cause of misery in all advanced societies. I might add that if you're sceptical about some of those numbers, if you put in a person effect, the pattern is the same. If you lag the mental illness measure, the pattern is still the same. So that I think is the basis of our humanitarian core sort of case for, doesn't say the case for mental well-being, does it? But that is where I would start in making the case for mental well-being as a central feature of government concern. Then, of course, there's a second issue. Actually, can we do anything about it? And there, of course, the clinical psychologists have been the crucial people who have shown that we do have evidence-based psychological therapies that give 50% recovery rates, reduced rates of relapse and so on. And NICE has played an important role here, if you count that as a social science institution, in recommending these therapies. But the extraordinary situation some 7 or 8 years ago was that although NICE had been recommending these therapies for some years, they simply weren't available, practically unavailable in most parts of the country, which was quite extraordinary. So how could one make the case in a more persuasive way than by those two? Well, we shouldn't have to. I firmly believe we shouldn't have to. But it turned out that we could actually make a difference by making a third argument, which was the economic argument. So we were able to show in 2007 that if we rolled out psychological therapies to the population in general, the impact on quite small numbers of them who were currently not working and then worked as a result of the treatment would be such that the savings on incapacity benefits and lost taxes would completely pay for the programme. And this made a big difference to the way the Treasury and others thought about this possibility. More recently, actually, we've been developing an additional case for which there's really quite strong evidence, which is that because mental illness aggravates physical illness, if we could help people with their mental health problems, we would in fact save as much on physical health care as we spent on the psychological therapies. So actually we'd pay for the cost of the psychological therapies twice over, once in savings to DWP, if you like to put it that way, but once, which is probably more important politically, in savings to the local health commissioners who really need to be persuaded of this case. Anyway, we made these arguments. We had great support from BACP, for which many, many thanks. And in 2008, the programme that you mentioned was launched by Alan Johnson. Andy gave it a further push, and the coalition government has given it a further push, though we know there are some problems currently which are being ironed out. And we know that the programme needs to be at least double its present size to cater with the huge volume of depression and anxiety disorders in our country. Of course, this was for adults, For children, we had CAMS services which were delivering therapy, but in many cases not evidence-based. So as a result of that, we now have a so-called Children and Young Persons IAPT program, which is upgrading CAMS services. But the volume of CAMS services has been cut, as you know. Shockingly, it's been perhaps the worst victim of all of the present cuts. And it's absolutely imperative to restore the cuts and, again, get something like a 50% increase in CAMS, at least, within the next Parliament. So I think we do know a lot about how to treat mental illness when it presents itself, and the case that we can make for why that should be much more central part of our health service. But of course it would be much better to prevent mental illness before it arose. I'm going to be a little cautious here. I'll tell you our experience. Our experience was that we introduced the Penn Resilience Programme, which is one of the main programmes available worldwide for developing resilience in 11-year-olds. So we introduced this into 22 schools with control groups, and the results were okay, but they were not world-changing. They may have changed the world for, one or two of the people, but the average result was not world-changing. The biggest result, interestingly, that lasted was the academic result. So this is very useful when talking to Mr. Gove. The academic result was that children who had been through the 18 hours of this programme rose by 5 percentage points out of 100 in their academic performance for the following 3 years, as long as we followed them. That's quite interesting. But actually the emotional results faded. They were quite good in the first year, especially on people who started off in the bottom part of the depression scale. Even after allowing for a regression to the mean, they were quite good. But they faded. They had gone by a year or so down the road. And I think that we've got to be careful about not overclaiming on prevention programs which have good short-run effects. What I firmly believe now is that the dosage issue is absolutely central. Dosage and boosting, both. So what we're doing now is we're trying to, we started in September, doing another pilot on a similar number of schools of a program of life skills which would last every week for the first 4 years of secondary schools, which would cover the normal range of topics covered by PSHE, plus how to become a good parent in future, plus mental health as an issue, which I think is not fully covered at the moment, but will be covered. I think that unless we embed our concern with well-being much more deeply into schools than on these odd little short programs which are currently being promoted in some places, we won't have the impact we need. And Catherine Weir has always said the ethos of the school is crucial. Of course it is. The basic values of the school are crucial, but we also should be teaching life skills, but we should be a curriculum item based on manualised methods with teachers properly trained to do them. And we know that the SEAL programme, which had very good intentions, when it was rigorously evaluated, was not found to be very successful because, as the authors of the evaluation said, it was not sufficiently manualised and the teachers were not sufficiently trained to do it. Let me just end with the wider issues. I mean, this is part of course, a wider campaign to get well-being accepted as the central objective of governments. As you know, we've had some success in this country at the higher level. We are now using a measurement of the population well-being, which was provided by our centre. The OECD has now adopted the same principles of measuring well-being and promoting them throughout the OECD member countries. The UN has got interested. They had a conference on happiness last year, and for that we were co-editors and writers of the first World Happiness Report. Some people call it the UN World Happiness Report, but it actually wasn't the UN, it was ours, but we managed to give that impression. And then we produced the second one this year. And now, interestingly, Gus O'Donnell, who was the Cabinet Secretary, is chairing a commission on what would a government do differently if its aim was well-being. How would it organise itself? How would it organise its methods of selecting priorities and evaluating policies? And what might some of the actual differences in policies be? So this is all moving forward. All of it is based on social science. None of it would have happened without social science. So very, very good luck to your campaign. I'll just end with a quick story, because I do think that in the end, how all of these things go depends on what the general public believe and think matters, which is why a group of us founded something called Action for Happiness. I don't know if there are any members of Action for Happiness here. But if you were, you would have pledged to lead your life so as to create more happiness in the world and less misery. We have 30,000 members. But when we appointed the director, we interviewed a number of people, and one had gone into the computer to find out if there was any charity that had the word happiness in the title. And the answer that came back on his screen was, your search for happiness has produced no results. I think we'll do a lot better, especially with Andy's help.
Well, thank you very much, Richard.